So today we are talking about rep ranges, the optimal rep ranges for hypertrophy. Now, before we go on, make sure you like the video, subscribe. If you are interested in coaching, there is a link in the description, so get in touch. Now, rep ranges. For the purpose of this video, when I say something like 5 to 8 rep range, what I'm referring to is using a weight which is heavy enough to fail or at least get close to failure in that range, all right? So when I talk about reps, there's nothing special about a rep in itself. It's more about the weight you use and fail in that rep range. For example, you wouldn't take a weight you can use for 20 reps and then fail at 5 and assume that's going to be good for hypertrophy, because it's not, right? So we're talking about weights which are heavy enough to be used in the rep range that I'm about to quote. Now, that's pretty obvious, but it's worth saying because I have had that question before in the past, as crazy as it sounds. Optimal rep ranges. The very first rep range that I want to talk about is the 5 to 8 rep range. It's a fairly narrow range, which I think is, generally speaking, if you can get away with it, the best rep range for hypertrophy. And let me explain, because that's a pretty big statement, right? Because when you're using a weight which is heavy enough to lift for 5 to 8 reps, it means that right from the first repetition, most of your fast twitch muscle fibers, the ones which are responsible for the majority of growth that you see in your body, are going to be active in lifting that weight. And as you go through the set, what should happen is those muscle fibers get more and more fatigued, and that delivers a very strong message to the body to grow. So we could say, in a way, the 5 to 8 rep range is the easiest rep range to train hard in for the purpose of hypertrophy. That's probably a nuanced way of looking at things. If we were to do sets of 15 and 20, we would need to get deep down into those painful portions of the set to really see growth. We would have to push those sets closer and closer to failure to really see growth. Whereas if we're using a weight which is heavy in that 5 to 8 rep range, then it is heavy enough that we are stimulating hypertrophy pretty much from rep 1, which is a good deal, right? So for the majority of circumstances, 5 to 8 rep range is fantastic. Now, there are clearly some exceptions, okay? So that's not for everything, but a young, healthy individual, which most of you guys are, you want to be using 5 to 8 rep range with large multi-joint compounds like your squats, your benches, your deadlifts, your stiff leg deadlifts, your leg presses, your incline presses, your dips, your chins, all that good stuff, right? And obviously you want to try and progress the amount of weight on the bar, because if you just kept using the same weight for the same rep range, it would be too easy after a while. So progressive overload still counts to get you back into that rep range of a weight which is heavy enough that you would fail at the 5 to 8 rep range. So that's the first rep range. Now, next section is to do with rep ranges after that. However you want to look at it, there's either 1 or 2 rep ranges after that, either 8 to 15 or 2 rep ranges, 8 to 12 and 12 to 15, whatever, however you want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about them both in one, right? So I'm going to talk broadly about the 8 to 15 rep range as one range, even though it's quite a large range. There are 2 major reasons why we might want to do some work in that range, or even all of our work in that range. The first reason is variety. Now, variety for variety's sake is important. Variety helps us grow. Variety means we are getting a slightly different type of stimulus, and also we may have individual proclivities towards certain rep ranges, which we don't even know about, because right now in 2023, we don't really have the genetic testing to tell us which types of reps we are most suited to, but we can experiment. What we know from the research is that some people do respond to higher reps, some people do respond to lower reps, and some people respond to a combination of reps. So for the majority of people out there, it probably behooves them to at least try different rep ranges. The first reason for why you might want to program in some of your work in the 8 to 15 rep range is simply for variety. And if you look at one of my most popular ebooks, The Wizard Full Body Program, and even in my Barbarian, the Upper Lower program, I do program in variety of rep ranges for this reason. The second reason is that higher repetitions and lighter weights mostly do work better for isolation exercises. Now, why is that? why does a lighter weight and higher rep range work with an isolation exercise like a push down or a dumbbell fly? Well, there are a couple of reasons. The first reason is joint integrity. For a lot of people, if they're trying to do a 5 rep max on a dumbbell fly, it's a risky thing to do. Like on a push down, for example, it's risky for the elbows, risky for the pec muscles. You can expose yourself to a tear. If you're doing a preacher curl, for example, it's not a good idea to use low reps either. For all those reasons, it's probably a good idea to use a slightly lighter weight, because with those exercises, you put yourself in a position where you're loading at quite an unfavorable angle for the muscle, which can make it a little bit more dangerous. So that's the first reason. Now, second reason is something that people don't really think about very often, and that is with a lot of big guys, they are quite used to muscling up a weight, right? So a lot of big guys will muscle up their benches, muscle up their squats, muscle up their deadlifts. Now, the problem is, if you use that approach on a side lateral, I can guarantee you're not going to get a very good shoulder workout. One thing you'll see quite commonly in the pro ranks is pro bodybuilders who do lots of heavy exercises. When it comes to the arms, they will do the lightest, most isolated machine or cable exercise, because they're so big, it becomes very easy to just simply muscle up a weight. And without even really thinking about it, their lower back has taken over what should be a good delta exercise or a bicep exercise. So a lot of really big guys, particularly the pro bodybuilders, will really isolate the hell out of smaller muscle groups. And you can almost tell the development of somebody who's done mostly compounds, because they tend to be very big and bulky in the big areas like the chest, the back, the legs, but not so much in the smaller areas like the arms and stuff like that. So higher rep ranges and slightly lighter weights just allow you to have that little bit more focus, so you can make sure you're using the muscles you intend to work in an exercise, rather than either accidentally or on purpose just muscling a weight up with your hips or your back. Okay. Finally, the third reason is for people with compromised joint integrity. So, and that describes a lot of people out there. Okay. A lot of people, either young or old, people who either through genetics or through injuries don't have the joint integrity necessary to handle the heavy weights for lower reps. It's pretty normal. It's pretty normal. Not everyone is suited to do reps of 5 to 8, for example. Lots of people out there would do way better with sets of 8 to 12 or higher. So we've established so far that out of the two major rep ranges, 5 to 8 is preferable. Okay. However, if you can't do 5 to 8, or you need to have a bit of variety, which I think is useful, there are other rep ranges, broadly speaking, 8 to 15. Now, at this point, I just want to stop for a second and just emphasize that it probably pays to experiment a little bit within the confines of these two rep ranges. Because one, variety itself may well be useful. Two, you may well be suited to different rep ranges. But let's say you've only been training for a couple of years and you've been training with a particular style of training which really focuses on 5 to 8 rep range. If you've never experienced high reps, 8 to 12, 12 to 15, if you've never really put in some solid work on 12 to 15, then you may well be missing out on some gains. Like I know, for example, a pretty common thing is using a leg press or a hack squat in sets of 12 to 15 works really well. This is something which people have known for decades. High reps on leg work works very, very well. If you've never really experienced that and all you've ever done is sets of 5 to 8 on squats and leg presses, well, you might have achieved some growth, but you actually might be leaving quite a lot of growth on the table. So it's worth experimenting with. I would encourage you guys to experiment within what are two fairly well-established, sensible rep ranges. Now, at this point, I want to talk about rep ranges which go beyond 15. So we're talking about the 20s, 25s, 30, 35, all that, maybe even up to 50. So there are various reasons why you might want to delve into those ranges. But from the off, I will say the majority of you guys who are young, healthy, and uninjured, and also still quite small, you won't need to go this far. Okay, there's no need. You don't need to do it just to tick off the variety box. Just stick to the basics and improve. Trust me, one day you'll be old, you'll be injured, like there's plenty of time for that. For now, just work on the established, okay? But going back to my point, There are some reasons for why you might want to go higher. Firstly, there are some exercises and modalities which are suited to higher reps. Calisthenics, for example, higher rep calisthenics. Great, love them. Those do tend to work well in those higher rep ranges and really relying on the reps with your own body weight to get the stimulus for growth. Now, it's pretty painful. Getting to sets of 35 and 50, the lactic acid builds up, things start to burn, but if that's the way you want to go, then it can be quite productive. Second reason I would say is for existing injuries. Not necessarily for injury prevention, but for existing injuries, you may want to go that light. For example, a very common one is tricep pushdowns for sets of 50. Keeps the elbow feeling good, gets the blood flow going, great. Third reason is variety. Now, I don't think that's a great reason for going this high in reps, but for you, you might want to. You might just be into reps that high, which is fine. Nothing against that. In conclusion, just to wrap this up, the majority of the time, your reps will probably be in that 5 to 8 rep range, assuming you are young, fit, healthy, and you're still growing. Once you get past that range, there are definite uses for sets of 8 to 15. And I would say the majority of people will be doing sets of 8 to 15 on at least isolation exercises, things like that. There is also room for 8 to 15 if you are a bit older or if your joints aren't particularly robust, then that allows you to keep the weight lower while still training heavy and hard. And I think you should experiment to see what's best for you. And finally, there is potentially room for reps in the 20 to 25 and above range, but I don't think that's the first choice for most people. Okay, folks, I want to hear from you. What is your favorite rep range? Where do you normally work? Why? And do you like a variety of rep ranges? And has that had to change over time? Okay, folks, I'll call it there and I'll speak to you in the next one. All the best for now.